Hey everyone, it is Rachel with Closed Door Romance. I am here with JD Rogers, who is a romantic suspense author. We're going to be talking all about her books and her journey as an author. So I can't wait to get started.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk to you. I feel like ever since I found your books last year, they've just blown me away. And I'm so excited to get to know more about you and about your book. All right. So tell me, how did this all begin? How did your journey to becoming an indie author start?
Gosh, okay. So I will say, I feel like I've always seen myself as a writer. I mean, it's like when I was a child, I was always coming up with different ideas, and I even found like a yearbook post from high school where I was like working on a book, and they'd like taken a picture of me, like I was clearly not working on a book. I was like the picture was like me with a notebook, like it was a blank sheet of paper, but. I have no idea what book I was working on at the time, but I was convinced all the way back then that I was going to someday be a published author. Um, and then just life kind of took a different path. I ended up in college and I graduated in public relations, and I kind of found my passion in journalistic writing. So even though I wasn't a journalist, but I worked for different companies. I worked for a lobbying firm, writing legislation and writing municipal government documents and that kind of thing. And so for a long time, like that was sort of, I wrote press releases and did more like short, snappy type writing, if that makes sense.
Right.
And then I became a technical editor from that, and just did a lot of like editing of documents, and that sort of became my career. So for
Okay.
20 years or so, I did technical writing, and then COVID hit. I was a mom, I had 4 kids, and we had just made a huge move for my husband's job. And we moved from Arizona to Seattle. And Seattle was sort of like the epicenter of all things COVID at the very beginning.
For sure.
So we flew in like the day of the very first lockdown. And I realized in a very short span of time that I was going to be homeschooling my children, that my husband was going to be working from home in a totally new city where we had no parks, no school, no church, like nothing. And that was a shock to the system. And I just realized like I need something that feels sort of grounding. And
Yeah.
my stories became that thing because I didn't feel like I needed a hobby. And I'm like, I don't have time to learn a new hobby.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I can write, and I can write in 10 minutes sprint when my kids are eating a snack, and kind of in between things I could sort of feel moments. And that's when I wrote my first 2 novels. I like took time here and there and I just wrote them over a 6 month period while my kids were being homeschooled and we were hanging out at home.
Oh my goodness, that's so awesome. And that's a lot. Like, I don't know
It
how
was
your
a
brain would
lot.
think, like, here's your snack. Now here, let me get back to my novel. The snacks would just end up in the novel and it would just be like a huge mess if I tried.
It took a lot of editing. I will say that the first drafts were not what ended up being printed, but it was so good for me. I honestly, writing them, I didn't ever think I was going to publish them. I just was like, these are stories that have been on my heart for a decade or more, because both of them are maybe we'll get to that a little later, but both of them are sort of inspired by true events in my life. And so it was like these stories that had sort of been birthed by different life experiences that I'd had, and they just always had sort of been ringing in the back of my mind. So it was good to get them on paper finally.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about your first one. So Midnight on the Tigress. And I'm like, I forgot to flip the camera, but it's okay. Pretend it's flipped. Um, so what real life events? Because this takes place in Baghdad, and so not a lot
Yes.
of books are there. And I know you've been there, but I don't know like the backstory. So how did this story come to be? Because it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. And that's honestly, it was why I wanted to write a story, because not very many people in our generation have been to a city or a country like Iraq and Baghdad. And it's such a beautiful historical place. I was so blown away by its beauty that I really was like, it would just be so magical to have a romance story set here. I worked for the US government. I was like a expatriate contractor. So I worked there for 6 months just on a government contract working for USAID. And I was reporting to them about basically how government funding was being spent in the different provinces.
Okay.
And so similar to the main character in the story Caroline, I had a very similar job. And it's funny to me because I feel like a lot of times when people read it, they talk about how some of the things that happen are sort of unbelievable. And I'm like, oh, ironically, they might be unbelievable, but they really happened.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
I did not have a hot bodyguard, unfortunately. But a lot of the other things really did happen. So
Okay, that's crazy. I cannot imagine living there in those routes and those places. Like,
it's the
I don't
kind
think
of
I could
thing you
imagine
can
quite as
only
much.
I swear to you, it's the kind of thing that you can only do when you're young and impulsive and have like no real responsibilities. Like I think back to it now and I'm like, my parents must have been having a heart attack.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Like even reading it, I'm like, oh my goodness.
But a real life
Um,
love story was born out of it in that my now husband, he Skyped me every day that I was there and missed me very much. So we got engaged like a month after I came home. So.
I just wanted like, you're safe, you're mine, you're not going anywhere anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So why did you decide to do romantic suspense? Because so far your two novels and your novella are all romantic suspense. So why did you go with that genre of romance?
I feel like I just sort of fell into it. Like, they talk about like write what you know and write the story you want to read. And I feel like that's just what I'm drawn to. I really like the angst of real drama and real challenges. Like I don't love like manufactured angst. That's not really something like I kind of tune out of that. I'm like, I feel like there was a moment in my life when I enjoyed that, but now as I've gotten into more mature relationships, it's like I still like the angst, but I don't like it to be based on sort of trivial problems. I like the real life stuff. And when I was writing Midnight on the Tigress in particular, I really felt a drive and a compulsion to draw awareness and attention to human trafficking, particularly because in war-torn countries, it's just such a prevalent problem. Not just sex trafficking, but human trafficking for human slave labor as well. And when you're in kind of environments that are experiencing a lot of political upheaval, you just have such a vulnerable population. And so I felt the need sort of from my experience to share that. And I just don't know how you can make that lighthearted. So
Yeah, no, for sure.
I felt like romantic suspense is sort of the way to go.
Yeah, no, and you did it flawlessly. Like I absolutely love them because they just keep you on your edge of the seat.
All right, so you wrote Midnight on the Tigress. You left it on a major cliffhanger at the end.
I know.
So, are you giving us book 2? Are we going to get the next one?
You will. You know what is it's so frustrating, even as an author. Like, I have such a squirrel brain, and it's like I'm a mood reader. I don't know if you are, but I'm an absolute mood reader, and turns out I'm a mood writer too. So I just have gotten distracted. And I'll be honest, my first 2 books that came out, I wrote them sort of synonymously. Like I wrote them at the same time, at least the first draft. And so when I released them, I didn't even think about the fact that like people would read the first book and then be like, but where's the next part? You know what I mean? Because that didn't even occur to me. And then I got drawn into this novella series that I'm so excited about. That's been so fun to write. And I did tie in that story a little bit to Midnight on the Tigress. It's not Anna Harris' story, but it is a portion of the story. Okay. And it's definitely linked to it. But I think what will probably end up happening is that I probably will write a novella as well to go and like kind of give us resolution for the Tigress story. So I'm so sorry. It's drafted. I've got a plot outline, but I just keep getting squirrel brained and totally distracted by other delicious stories I want to tell. So.
Yeah, well, that's totally fine. Okay, so people need to know that you have Midnight on the Tigress, and then you do have Midnight on the Thames, but they're not related. They're not together. No. Other than they're both romantic suspense and both amazing, but it does not go book 1, book 2 like I thought it was. They're totally different.
Totally different. And so Midnight on the Thames is actually set in London. And it, like you said, it's also a romantic suspense, but based on different characters, totally different sort of like world building. My intention is to have like a loosely tied series. I do have a third book in what I would call the Midnight River Romance series, because I just think that rivers are so romantic and lovely and beautiful, and big cities wonderful. I love to travel. That's just, before I became a mom, that was like my whole life. And so I think that there's like places in the world. I know that for me, sorry, I'll backtrack a little. From my childhood, I grew up on a native reservation in coastal Oregon, and my dad was a high school teacher there. And I never left my hometown. Like, super, super tiny town. Just no, I mean, I didn't even like leave to shop. You know, I mean, it was like I did not leave this area. And then the day I graduated from high school, I had a flight to Mexico with my best friend, and I've like never looked back, as far as like just being so addicted to traveling. And that inspiration came through books. Like, I was a voracious reader as a child, and I just love the way that books can sort of transport you to a place that maybe you'll never see in your lifetime, you know?
Yeah.
And like I said, like I mentioned with Baghdad, it's not a place that just anybody can go, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to share its beauty and its like majesty and how incredible the world is, even if that's not a place that you get to go. And so through this series, that's sort of what I'm hoping to show, is like vivid imagery of places I've been, or places I dream to go, and share sort of the beauty of the world that can kind of transport you to a place that maybe you long to visit or hope to visit someday.
No, I absolutely have loved your books for that, because the way you write and the imagery behind it, like I totally pictured myself there, even though probably Baghdad isn't like the highest on my list of places I want to visit, but I was still like, okay, like I can totally imagine what it would be like. You know, maybe not the heat level on everything, because I'm sure it was like ridiculously hot, but still like the imagery of how it would look was so well done that you could totally picture yourself there for sure.
I love that. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, for sure, with flying colors. All right, so tell us about your most recent novella that came out. Was it last week or a few days ago? Like, it's like very soon.
Friday. Yeah, last Friday. So it's the third in a 4-part novella series. We've got Kira Dominguez, Hope Snyder, and Ashley Funk are my other co-authors. I would say the stories are not super linked to one another. You've got, everybody has their own writing style. I'm very much a romantic suspense author, whereas, you know, Ashley Funk is much more of a rom-com author, and that is totally reflected in the stories as well. I did tie my story a bit to Hope Snyder's story. Some of the content in her story like lends very well into my story. So you're just going to get 4 totally different stories. And I will say that they all, despite being novellas, I was a little worried, because as a romantic suspense author, it's like you've got to fill a lot of holes, you know? I mean, it's like you need you need continuity, you need space to sort of create the drama and the romance. Right. And I was a little worried about how that was going to play out. But these stories are just so action-packed, and like, you know, it's definitely fast-moving. A lot of people who've read it have said like they read it in one sitting, and it's, you know, it's really fast-paced. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited. Like I saw you came out with them. I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to read that one. And I actually am excited. I don't read a lot of novellas. Most of the time, it's all novels, because I like the time with the characters and the build-up and the slow burn. But I am actually kind of excited that it is a novella that I could just read in one sitting and be like, yeah, you know?
Yes, it's like a palate cleanser between
yes, for sure. Because I feel like lately I've been reading a lot of historical fiction and Regency, and sometimes I just need like an action-packed, like romantic suspense to just be like, okay. All right. So I want to know, why have you chosen to stay closed door or non-explicit? Because I know right now everybody is writing romance books, but most of them choose to be explicit and go that direction. So why have you decided to not to kind of go against the grain and stay closed door or not explicit?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And what I love about it is that like the closed door community has been amazing, first of all. Like I just really love how supportive everybody is and how encouraged I am to find readers who are really looking for the kind of content that I read and that I want to write. I would say that primarily the reason I've stayed in that genre is my own, moral compass and what I find appropriate, what lifts my spirit up. As an editor, I've had quite a range of content that's sort of been sent my way. And I just feel like sort of protecting my own space and my own spirit, it was important to me to create content that I felt like would uplift people. Even if I'm addressing sort of those grittier topics, I wanted it to be, even though the subject matter is weightier, I wanted it to still feel like a story you would want to talk about with your friends and your family. Also, I'm from a really big family. I have 6 older brothers, and I have a dad who all are wildly supportive of my work. And I'm like, they're going to read this. Like,
have they read it?
Yeah. My dad in particular, he always, every time he comes, he always brings a copy of one of my books and is like, I need you to sign this for me.
So cute.
He's the sweetest. I love my dad. So supportive of me and has just always been my biggest cheerleader as far as like, you can accomplish anything. So he's amazing. And yeah, I mean, this is like, when I know that he's going to read it, I've got 4 sons. I don't want them to feel embarrassed or ashamed of something that I have put out into the world. I want them to feel proud of it and not feel like it's something they can't talk about with others. And so, not that I mean, to each their own. I don't want to like shame anybody else's content. Totally, whatever anybody else feels comfortable writing or reading is great. But I felt like there was sort of a void in this space. I guess I feel like a lot of closed door content tends to be that squeaky clean Hallmark vibe. And that's great. That's really great. But as a reader myself, I felt like I like those edgier topics, and I like I mentioned, the angst and the drama of the suspense. But I found that a lot of romantic suspenses had content I just didn't feel comfortable reading. So I wanted to bring a unique voice to the space.
Yeah, and you did, totally. And you nailed it, because I feel like sometimes, I don't know, with some romantic suspense, you either get like a lot of like the angst and the danger and everything, but then like it's one kiss, or it's like reversed. And then you're like, wait a second, but you like have a really good level on both. Like you can have those sizzling kissing and that great great romance, but then also have that really intense suspense aspect to it. And I think you nailed it, where both levels are high. Like it's just, they're great for sure.
Oh, that makes
and
me
I
so
also
happy.
love that you chose not to do any swearing in it too, because I feel like sometimes if you are getting, more sizzling kissing, more action, suspense, then automatically they start swearing. And then I'm just like, like I get that sometimes for the danger aspect, and it is more real life that people just start swearing when everything's going crazy, But I love that you chose to not do any swearing in your books, but you still get those sizzling kisses, you still get the high action, the high mystery, the high suspense, but without the whole swearing aspect of it.
Yeah, that's really important to me too. And I, like you said, I do think it is realistic. And so I tried to write things in a way, and including the intimacy of my characters. I feel like I try to write those scenes in a way that, like, if you want to imagine more happened, you can. It's very ambiguous. Like, what you get some description of the kissing, but you don't get too specific. You know what I mean? And I just appreciate that. And even when, like, I'll say things like he cursed under his breath, like that to me is realistic without crossing my boundary of what I feel like I feel comfortable putting out into the world. So
yeah, no, I love the balance of everything in your books for sure. All right, so last question. So I want to know, because you are an indie author or independent author, so you're basically doing everything to bring these books to us. So what part of that is the hardest? And then what would you tell to those that want to be an indie author too?
Sure. I highly recommend going the indie route. If I'm honest, like I didn't even query. And I find that sometimes indie authors are sort of nervous to say that they are self-published or indie. And I'm like, wear it like a badge of honor. I worked in the traditional publishing industry as a copy editor and as a publicist for like book tours and stuff. And the space is just, there's a lot of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
And so for me, I chose to go indie because I wanted to keep that creative control. I didn't want to be forced to put language or scenes in my books that I didn't feel comfortable with. I didn't want the way I write my author voice to be sort of edited out of my stories. And I feel like with the publishing world the way that it is, and the supportive community that we can find through connecting on Instagram, TikTok, and like, you know, some of these other social media platforms, you remove some of those barriers to be able to really write the authentic story that you want. So I strongly encourage anybody who's considering whether or not to go traditional or indie to really explore indie, and not as like a backup option. Like I do think it's really, really an awesome way to go. That being said, as you mentioned, it's not easy.
No, not at
and
all.
you do get a lot more support in the traditional space, you know, via editors and cover designers, and all of that becomes sort of your decision. The hardest part for me, I think most indie authors will agree, is marketing. And it's not really because I think that the marketing is difficult in and of itself, although it can be.
Right.
Coming up with new ideas and all of that, and learning some of the technology. But because of my past experiences, I know some of it. I mean, I was a PR professional for a long time. That said, it's a creative drain, if that makes sense. It's its whole own creative space. And I feel like what becomes challenging is I have to sort of decide, am I going to be content creation creative today, or am I going to write my stories? And doing both is really hard to balance, because you just feel like all your creative energy has been sort of sucked dry.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that.
So.
Well, it was great to talk to you, JD, and I'm so excited that more people get to know about your books, because they are so amazing and everyone should read them. And I hope that we get that whole, you know, sequel novella soon. So you have to be in the mood soon for us, so that we can get, you know, the end of that cliffhanger and the end of the series, because I'm so excited for it. And I'm so excited to read the novella. And the novella is Shield Her, is that right?
Yes, it's called Shield Her. And like I mentioned, there's a 4-part series. It's called the Black Swan Protection Novellas. So you can find them on Amazon. They're available on Kindle Unlimited and on Amazon. So.
Okay, I'm so excited. Thank you for taking the time to just talk and hang out and let us know more about you and your books.
I appreciate the opportunity so much. Have a great day.